G'day everyone, and welcome to Reliance Australia. Today I want to talk about something that, I don't know, some people may put some thought to, but some people clearly do not. And that is, how much food do you need to store, apart from your normally weekly shop or your fortnightly shop, whatever it is that you go and use to eat on put food on the table, but how much food do you need to put aside for emergencies? So what prompted this video today is the recent events over in New Zealand. So before we start, I'd just like to send our thoughts and prayers to the people of New Zealand at this time. They've had major floods, then they had a major cyclone come through, and now they've had an earthquake, and it's been devastating, particularly the North Island of New Zealand. So thoughts and prayers to everyone over there at this time. I heard on the news, one of my news feeds, that the authorities over in New Zealand had recommended that people, especially when the cyclone was coming in, also they had some prior warning of that coming in, so they were recommending people to get supplies to sustain them for at least 3 days. That same news report went on to say that within hours, all of the supermarkets in that area were empty. So that was very clear indicator that people do not have food stored for probably more than a few days, if that. There seems to be a move away from people cooking at home and more of a trend to eating out more regularly, so that way they're not keeping more food or keeping enough food in the house. And that's fine. But when emergencies like this come through, natural disasters come through, and you're living in an area that is prone to that, it's always worthwhile to have some extra supplies on hand. Now, the fact that the authorities have said 3 days, I think that's a great starting point. We talk about, I guess that's the title of the video, how much food should you have on hand as a backup. Now, I'm not saying or talking about the zombie apocalypse here where the earth is collapsing and world order has fallen into chaos.
You're probably going to need a little bit more than 3 days.
But I'm talking now about how to get out of or away from a natural disaster that's coming. You can scan through YouTube and you can read up about bug out bags and all that sort of stuff. And most of the people will talk about 72 hours. 72 hours will allow you the time to move away to whether it's going to be family or friends. For us in Australia, 3 days will get you interstate quite easily. It'll get you a lot of kilometres covered, and that will move you away from any of that, I guess, that storm damage that's going to be occurring. Some people like to stay, and that's a personal choice. You may need more than 3 days, especially if there's a flood that's going to be cutting off your particular area. You might be stranded for a few days, especially if you're without power. So you need to be taking those type of things into consideration as well. I guess personally, I like to have more than 3 days, but we do we do all of our cooking ourselves. So we eat at home majority of the time. So for me, it'd be a couple of weeks worth of food. And depending on how often you shop, whether you're shopping weekly or fortnightly, I'd probably have at least double that. So if you're doing a weekly shop, probably have a fortnight's worth of food on hand, stored away somewhere. So if something does go bad and you can't get out, and it might be that the roads are blocked or storm damages, cause power to go out, or they've just shut the supermarkets. I think COVID was a good example. Now the supermarkets never really shut down, but people just panic buyed. And people are fighting over toilet paper. So even some of those simple necessities, it's not just food, it's like, how do you go to the toilet? What are you going to feed your pet cat or your pet dog? Keeping those supplies readily available for an extended period of time, and just be a few days to a few weeks, I think is a good starting point. Now, it doesn't need to cost a lot of money. I know when I first started putting a few extra supplies aside, I was just buying 6 cans in the weekly shop. Now, when you're buying a can of beans for $1.50, that doesn't add up to be a great deal extra on a shopping list. But it builds up over time, and so then you can actually get a nice little stash away to help you through periods like New Zealand has just seen. And look, it's not just New Zealand. Australia has had their fair share of bushfires where people have to move out, move away. But that's also something to take in consideration when you're talking about or thinking about how much do you need. And I think it is a personal choice. It's a bit like how long is that piece of string. If your plan for a natural disaster is actually to move out, which ours is, because you don't want to be hunkering down in fire. It doesn't normally end that great. If you have 6 months worth of food supply, where are you going to put it? If you got the family, the kids, the cat, the dog in the car, where are you going to put 6 months worth of food? So this is where having an idea about what your plan is to move on or to stay in becomes really important. Another side of that too is then also how much fuel do you have in your car? So I know a lot of people that will literally run their petrol right down to nearly empty. I know people that run out of fuel multiple times. You just think, you got a fuel gauge, you probably should read it. But I guess it's maybe ingrained into me from my military days, where we would take a car, a military vehicle, we'd drive it 5 kilometres and bring it back. We'd actually have to go fill it up with petrol and so make sure the tank was full. But they have now relaxed that policy, and the policy now is that if it's under half a tank, fill it up. And I think that's a good indicator. If you've got less than half a tank of fuel in your car, you probably should be filling that up. Always have at least half a tank, because that will give you a couple of 100 kilometres to get away from a storm that's coming in. And in the case of New Zealand, and I'll use New Zealand as an example because that's been in the news in the last week. So there's a lot of homes that are now cut without power. I think it's over 10,000 homes without power. Thousands of people have been evacuated. And a lot of those disasters can be helped by people themselves. We can't rely on the governments to do absolutely everything for us and supply absolutely everything for us, because they just don't have the resources or the horsepower to do that. So if we heed the warnings, you have a plan in place to move out. It might be to family or relatives in a town that's a couple 100 kilometres away, or interstate in the case of Australia. Might be just some friends that you can go stay with for a few days. If you have that ability, then you should be putting that into your plan. And having enough fuel in your car is a good start. Like I know where we live, the petrol station isn't open 24 hours, closes at 7 o'clock at night. The nearest petrol station is over an hour's drive away. So if you don't have enough petrol in your car, you're going to get stuck. So being able to do that, then having the kit ready to go, your food ready to go, your clothes. I haven't understood what clothes you need, because I don't think you necessarily need to have a bag of clothes, because especially when you've got kids that are growing, they'll grow out of them before you get to use them, and that can be not the best use of your budget. But if you have an understanding of what you need for 3 days, cold, hot weather, have an understanding and have the bags close by so you can pack them quickly. Anyway, so I hope that's been helpful. If that's been good for you, please give us a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you next time.